Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Ecclesiastes, the 7th chapter. Wisdom and folly contrasted. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Okay, and that's going into that better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, right? So a good name, which is based on your the kind of life you've lived, right? The reputation or the memorial you leave behind is better than a precious ointment, which is like a good smelling perfume, or that kind of stuff, because it'll last you even after you're gone, right? And the day of death than the day of one's birth. Let's read that in here in the NLT. It says here, a good reputation is more valuable than costly perfume, and the day you die is better than the day you are born. And especially if you've lived a good life, right? Because then, you've accomplished things that you wanted to do. You can look back on your life and be satisfied. But when the day that you're born, you're now about to experience the hardships, of the world, right? The things that it has to offer to you. You don't know whether it's going to be good. You don't know whether it's going to be bad. You don't know what's going to happen when you turn 12 or 16 or 18. Verse 2, it is better to go into the house of mourning than to go into the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. And what he means by this is, doesn't mean that you can't have fun at all, but those that go into the house of mourning, he's going to say it in verse 3, right? It's more of a discipline, okay, for the mind. Those that are in the house of mourning are more sober-minded than those that give their life up to just feasting and partying, because, as it says, that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Because at the end of the day, that's not going to give you that good name. If all you do in your life is seek pleasure, you're going to end up, being spoiled, okay, and you're not going to know how to handle hard situations and difficult times. And the living will lay it to his heart, but really the wise are going to consider that. Sorrow is better than laughter. Like, for example, when you look at some people that ended up changing their lives, right? They'll give you like some story or something happened, right? Maybe they were on the wrong path, and then it's usually something bad that happened that opened their eyes, and it made them wiser. It made them say, yo, I can't keep living like this. Right? If I keep doing this, this is going to happen. Or it's because I was doing this that I lost this or lost that. And then they change their life around, and then they start to actually, be disciplined, versus one that isn't like that. One that is constantly in the house of feasting. They don't really have that moment of soberness to correct them or to get them serious. Verse 3, sorrow is better than laughter. For by the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better, right? That's going back to the point that I just made. That's why when you do something wrong, you're not, nobody's going to come and pat you on the back for doing something wrong. It's going to be bad. It's going to feel bad. It's not going to feel good, because then you're able to, you go through that pain, you go through that sadness, and you learn from it, because it's a feeling that it forces you to have to deal with reality, okay? And it makes your mind or your heart better, because you learn, next time I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I don't want to experience that sadness or that negative feeling that I had or that I went through before. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning. And that's why when you do something bad, your parents don't offer you cake or ice cream. They whip your ass. Because you'll be sad for a moment, but it'll make you better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. Just like the point I just made above, because the house of mourning, which makes you sober. Let's go into that word mourning. It says mourning, period of mourning, of rites of mourning, lamenting, lamentation. But it's not necessarily like literally always just like, because you're not always going to be mourning for somebody. You mourn when there's a need to mourn. But what's associated with somebody who is mourning? they're not in a mind of like being happy or being joyous. They're serious. They're sad, but they're thinking. They're reflecting on things. And eventually, after the days of mourning, they go about and doing what they gotta do, but their mind is different. If you lose somebody that's really really close to you, or especially over something that is some folly, or something very stupid, it's an eye opener. Okay, that's why it mentions the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning. You can't always be in that spirit of mirth and folly and every 2 seconds, because it's just really it brings your guard down. Okay, and it starts to weaken the mind. The mind is strengthened through hardships. It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. Because what is the rebuke of the wise going to do? It's going to make you better. It's going to correct your wrongs. And the less wrongs you have to be corrected, the more right your life will be. But to hear the song of fools, you're just going to be like one of them. So here it is. You got 1,000,001 things to work on, but the fools are not gonna. You're hanging out with a crowd of fools. They're not gonna tell you that. Yo, you got to fix this. Yo, you got to work on that. No. So what happens? You add on to the list of things you got to work on. You increase in folly. You end up living a vain life. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. Let's go into that in the NLT. A fool's laughter is quickly gone, like thorns cracking in a fire. This is also meaningless, right? Like if you were to, add it, like how you would fetch wood and you throw it in there to make a fire. If you have them thorns in there, basically, like when you're burning sticks, you hear the little snaps in the fire. That's what he's saying. It's temporary. Okay. So the laughter of the fool, the joy and the mirth that they experience is still temporary. That's why you constantly see people in the club and basically partying and living that kind of revelous lifestyle. They do it over and over and over again, because once Monday comes, it's gone. Once the night is over, the night is over. It's temporary. It's vanity. So they have to go and keep repeating it in order to keep getting that feel or that thrill. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Okay, and why? Because let's actually go into that word mad. A fool doesn't know that they're oppressed. But it says here, to act madly, act like a madman, to make a fool, to boast to glory, to be praised, right? To be made praiseworthy, to boast, to be boastful, to shine, right? Going into that word mad. So let's look at this here. In the NLT, it says, extortions turn wise people into fools, and bribes corrupt the heart. Extortion, and that's that oppression, turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. NKJV, surely oppression, and we'll go into that word oppression in a second, destroys a wise man's reason, and a bribe debases the heart. So let's look at that word oppression. It says here, extortion, right? Gain by extortion. So this corrupts or perverts the wisdom of the wise man, just like the scriptures say, a gift destroyeth the heart. See? Oh, there you go. All right. Because you may have somebody that can wisely judge a matter, but they will purposely misjudge it out of that gain, which here it uses the word oppression, which can make you think it's talking about like being oppressed, but it's actually used in the other sense. But I mean, even if you were to take it in that like say an oppressive state, that is still a true statement. Though it's not what's meant here, it's still a true statement, right? Because a one that is wise being oppressed, they're angry. Okay, not like as in the mad that is used in this context, but they're upset because they have the wisdom to know that they're being oppressed, right? If you're a slave and you realize you're a slave, that's when you want to escape. Okay, versus one that thinks that that's everyday normal life. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit than the proud in spirit. And that's why the scriptures tell you not to be hasty. In Ecclesiastes is the second chapter, right? It mentions don't make haste in time of trouble, because you got to see the end. When you see the end of a thing, you see the whole picture. And sometimes the 90, or not even 90, 60 or 70% of the way can feel negative. It can feel hard. It can feel difficult. But the last 30% of the way can be what leads to the greatest benefit you've ever had. So better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof. Like even when you're exercising, for those that are exercising, sometimes you're in the gym and you're training and 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, and you don't see any changes. You're working very, very hard, but you don't really see any noticeable changes. For those that give up and don't endure to see the end of their progress, right? Or the end of their hard work, which is the beginning of their progress, they give up too soon. And then they they miss out and they leave with a misconception and think that, no, there's no point in going to the gym. It doesn't work. There's no point in going on a diet. It doesn't work. And that's why it says, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Because those that are patient in spirit, they're going to be able to endure. They're going to be calm. They're going to be able to withstand whatever comes their way, being tried and being made better. It's kind of like being long suffering than the proud in spirit. Right? NLT, finishing is better than starting, and patience is better than pride. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. Because through anger, if you don't have self-control and discipline, you're going to end up doing something foolish. How many people do you see that'll, like today, they'll come out of jail or prison, and then they'll tell you, those that have, that have some sense in their brains, they'll tell you, look, I was in here because somebody said something to me. I got angry, and then I hit him, or I did this or whatever. And now I lost, this amount of time that I'll never get back over that. So don't, like don't do that, because it's a foolish thing to do, and it's going to cost you more than you think you're going to gain. Say not thou, what is the cause that the former days were better than these? For thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this. NLT, don't long for the good old days. This is not wise. Why is that? Because you're going to spend your whole life looking back in the past and not being able to pay attention to the present, because you're constantly looking back in the past about how much better life was back then, that you miss out on the good things that happen in this time. So that's why he said, thou dost not inquire wisely concerning this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. Okay, so as it says, wisdom is good with an inheritance. Let me look at this here in the NLT as well. Wisdom is even better when you have money, right? Going into the inheritance. Both are beneficial as you go through life, but wisdom is greater. And that is money and wisdom. Verse 12, for wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense. But the excellency of knowledge is that wisdom giveth life to them that have it. So, yes, wisdom is a defense. It will protect you, and keep you out of trouble and deliver you from certain situations. Money is also a defense. You need money in this world. That will also protect you and get you out of certain situations. But the excellency of knowledge, to decide between them both, the excellency of knowledge, the wise, the knowledgeable know that wisdom is greater than money, because wisdom giveth life to those that have wisdom. What does that mean? Well, if you have wisdom and you're already living, how is it going to give you life? What that means is just how the life here is a representation, not of like actual living life, but a good quality life. Consider the work of God, for who can make that straight which he hath made crooked? And the answer is nobody. If the Lord has made something crooked, it's like making something unclean. You cannot go and make an unclean animal clean. If an animal is unclean for eating, who's going to be able to go and say, now it's clean? No, the Most High made it that way. In the day of prosperity, be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider. God also hath set the one over against the other, to the end that man should find nothing after him. So keep in mind when you're, having a good time, and also when you have a bad time, because the Most High set them both. Right? Enjoy prosperity while you can, but when hard times strike, realize that both come from God. Remember that nothing is certain in this life. All things have I seen in the days of my vanity. There is there is a just man that perisheth in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man that prolongeth his life in his wickedness. So he's saying, like, I've seen the just end up dying in righteousness, and yet the wicked living longer than him, even though he's living in wickedness. And it's like he's saying this is vanity, because these things, and Solomon mentions, right, time and chance happeneth to them all. These things happen to where you may be just, but it doesn't mean that that you're gonna live long just because you're doing righteousness. And doing righteousness requires a lot more discipline, especially in a wicked world. And you would think that, well, the wicked would by default suffer, the shortness of life and the tragedies that should befall them. And yet sometimes it looks like the roles are reversed. Verse 16, be not righteous over much, neither make thyself overwise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? Right. So don't be over righteous, because then you're going to end up being over righteous in your own mind, doing too much, things that you don't need to do, going too far with things, and it's working against you. Okay. It says, don't be too good or too wise. Why destroy yourself? Because when you're too wise, you look too much into things. Okay, you're trying to over reason about everything. Right? You complicate simple things. And likewise, when you act too righteous, there's a reason the Lord has given us this grace. But now you're doing too much to the point where it's being counterproductive. Okay? And that's why it says, why shouldest thou destroy thyself? Be not overmuch wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time? Yeah, if you are living in full wickedness, right, or a foolish life, eventually you're going to trigger your own downfall. Right? And why shouldest thou die before thy time? That's like you're going to live a short life. It is good that thou shouldest take hold of this. Yea, also from this withdraw not thine hand. That is this wisdom. For he that feareth God shall come forth of them all. Right? He's going to be the one to the last one standing, the one to triumph above them all. Right? That is, there is none greater than he that feareth the Lord. Wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men which are in the city. Because, 10 mighty men, they can have physical might, but one with great wisdom can still defeat them all with wisdom. So it shows the power of wisdom, right? That it's more powerful in terms of strengthening a wise man more than 10 mighty that are in the city. For there is not a just man upon earth that doeth good and sinneth not. Right? None of us are perfect. Also, take no heed unto all words that are spoken, lest thou hear thy servant curse thee. So don't get offended with everything you hear, because sometimes you might hear certain things that are not pleasant to hear. But if you let everything get to you, you're gonna end up living a hard life. For oftentimes also thine own heart knoweth that thou thyself likewise has cursed others. See? So your servant, you might hear your servant, you might overhear them curse you, but you've done that to somebody too before. Don't forget that. All this have I proved by wisdom. I said I will be wise, but it was far from me. So he's saying, everything I'm speaking to you here, I've tested, right? NLT, I have always tried my best to let wisdom guide my thoughts and actions. I said to myself, I am determined to be wise, but it didn't work. That which is far off and exceeding deep, who can find it out? So there are certain things that are too far for you to go and search out. And that's why he said it was far from me, because there's a limit to how much he was able to experiment. There's a limit to, even though he had a great wisdom, there's a limit to how much you can how far you can go. I applied mine heart to know and to search and to seek out wisdom and the reason of things, and to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. So he said, right, through wisdom, I searched, I experimented to know things, understand how things work on the right hand and on the left hand, right, in folly, in foolishness and madness. And he said, and I find more bitter than death the woman. So you would be more at peace to die than to deal with the woman. Now, I was not speaking with just all women in general, but a wicked woman, okay, whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. Snares and nets are traps. Meaning her mind, her mind is always about how is she gonna, trap you? How is she gonna get one over you? And her hands as bands, which are like shackles, okay, to tie you down, basically. And that's what they all want to do. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her. See, and this is how you know this talking about a wicked woman, because the scriptures talk about how a righteous woman or virtuous woman is a gift from the Lord. So if this was speaking about all women, then that would mean that godly men wouldn't have women, because the Lord will have them escape from women. But it's not all women. But the sinner shall be taken by her. So he that is a sinner, the Lord will give him up to the hands of a wicked woman. And guess what? She will ruin your life. Behold, this have I found, saith the preacher, counting one by one, to find out the account, which yet my soul seeketh, but I find not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but of a woman among all those have I not found. Let's read this in the NLT. It says, "This is my conclusion," says the teacher. "I discovered this after looking at the matter from every possible angle. Though I have searched repeatedly, I have not found what I was looking for. Only one out of 1,000 men is virtuous, but not one woman." Damn, that's what Solomon said. Verse 29, "Lo, this only have I found, that God hath made man upright, but they have sought out many inventions." See, and those inventions led into the devising of wickedness. NLT, but I did find this: God created people to be virtuous, but they have each turned to follow their own downward path. And that brings us to the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, the 7th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.